we break the complexity of the writing, the whole process, into very small, manageable steps.
Hello, and welcome to the Arts of Language podcast with Andrew Pudewa, founder of the Institute for Excellence in Writing, or as many like to say, IEW. My name is Julie Walker, and I'm honored to serve Andrew and IEW as the Chief Marketing Officer. Our goal is to equip teachers and teaching parents with methods and materials which will aid them in training their students to become confident and competent communicators and thinkers. So for you listeners who are just tuning in, this is part 2 of our special education podcast. And Andrew, I'm not really sure if we're going to end it here or if we're going to have to go on to episode 3.
Well, that's the great thing about podcasts is neither the people doing them nor the people listening are quite sure what's going to happen.
What is going to happen? But I will tell you, in case you didn't hear it last week, and if you didn't hear it last week, please do go back and listen. It was so good. If I do say so myself. But Andrew, you were talking about the value of copy work. And I think this is just such a nice segue into our teaching writing structure and style methodology that we teach at IEW. Not that we necessarily teach copy work. I mean, we do in the primary grades. We definitely are advocates of it. But I do remember you talking to the students of the Structure and Style for Students Level A group, and you were encouraging them to do some copy work to build their stamina. So even at that level A, 8, 9, 10 years old, if they were struggling a little bit, keeping up with what you were doing.
Sure.
And there weren't many that were, but there were a couple. Mm-hmm. You really encouraged them to do copy work, and it helped tremendously.
Yes. I think it might be worth doing a whole podcast sometime just on that, because there's so much more that could be explored.
Yep.
And then, of course, what I have seen is in the world of curriculum, whether it's school or homeschool or something in between, I have seen people do copy work with young children, but they pretty much relegate it to very young children before they could write their own sentence.
Okay.
And then kind of an arbitrary, we stop doing the copy work, now here's the paper, write whatever you want.
Blank page.
And they go to the blank page. And, when that happens, sometimes it works great and the kids are fine, but most of the time it's just too big of a leap. And so in addressing this subject today, which is why does IEW work so well with special needs kids or second language learners or kids outside, the stereotypical academic profile.
Well, but it also works for the stereotypical academic profile.
Right, but we don't worry so much about that.
Right. Especially not today.
What I think is that what is started with copy work is imitation.
Oh, right.
Right? And then rather than saying, let's do a little bit of imitation and now let's jump totally into the world of improvisation and it's just you, your brain, and paper, and boom, let's go. What would be a reasonable pathway toward that blank page? And I don't know that Webster thought this way when he put these units together, or whether any of the other contributors, and I didn't really even understand it for the first 5-10 years.
Sure.
But as I've been at it longer, met more and more hundreds, thousands of kids, thousands of parents, teachers, what I have come to see is that our 9 units are the pathway between strict imitation and non-imitation. And so how do you gradually move? The other thing that I mentioned at the recent conference
Right. Yep.
is that whenever you meet a child who says, I hate writing, or I'm not good at writing, or I don't want to do writing, or I don't like it, or a parent who says that about a child, almost always the problem is overwhelm.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, think about anything you don't like doing. It's often the result of being overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
It's too much complexity. You don't know how you're going to get through it all. And that can be something as, mundane as clearing out a storage unit.
Yes. Are you speaking from experience, recent experience, Andrew?
And having this overwhelm of stuff
Yeah.
in your environment. And there's no way around it except to just blow it all up or sort through it and just walk that path.
Yep.
And, in the end, it's better to walk that path. But we have to know what the path is. Mm-hmm. So occasionally I'm in an elevator and someone says, hey, I heard about IEW. What's special or what's different or, what should I know about it?
Right. And this is an elevator,
And
so
I
you had
have,
to give your elevator speech, right?
15 seconds to somehow differentiate. And I just say, in all honesty, I think what we do better than anyone I know is we break the complexity of the writing, the whole process, into very small, manageable steps.
Yep.
And I don't mean that those dumb posters that end up on the walls in classrooms that say the writing process, and then it says 1, pre-write, gather your ideas, 2, draft, sloppy copy, 3, edit, improve, 4, publish, That's not enough.
That's not breaking it down.
That is not enough breaking it down for your average student.
Mm-hmm.
So,
not enough for your average student, but doubly, triply, quadruply so for those that need to overcome these obstacles.
Yeah, good observation. So what would be one step removed from copying, right? So here you have a poem or a paragraph or a page or whatever, and you look at every word in the sentence, or you just look at the first word or the first 2 words, and then you try to copy those first 2 words. Then you look at the next 2, you try to copy those, then maybe you got 3 short words, so you can maybe look at all 3 of those and copy those 3. And this is very slow.
Well, and can I just insert something with my own experience here? When I taught first grade, at the beginning of the year, I would have copy work for the children to do from the chalkboard. It really was a chalkboard. And I had different colors for every letter so the kids could remember. And I did it in order of the rainbow, Roy G. Biv. So it was red, orange. I skipped yellow because it was too hard. But anyway, the kids could see where they
Chalk is normally yellow.
Well, it wasn't bright enough compared to the other colors, right? But what I'm saying was the tracking of this was easy because it was all different colors, and they could remember where they picked up where they left off because we're talking first graders. But then I went to full words as being the same color, and then they could pick up there.
Okay. So you created a pathway even within that relatively simple activity of copying.
To go from a chalkboard to paper, even that's kind of hard for kids. Yeah.
So in any case,
copying
every word. Okay, we don't actually put that in our writing program.
No, we don't.
But
our PAL has, our Primary Arts of Language
does have that.
Does have copy work, yep.
But what would be one step removed? And that's where we start with Unit 1, which is don't copy the whole sentence. Read the whole sentence, choose a maximum of 3 keywords, and copy those words into the keyword outline.
And you actually have the kids underline them when they choose them, so it's easier for them to find them on the page.
Yeah, definitely if it's a first class or if it's young children or if it's kids who have challenges in that area. So that's one step removed. So you're not copying the whole sentence, you're making a choice which words to copy. It's an easy decision to make, but you still have to make it. And sometimes kids copy words that don't work, and then that comes out in the wash because we try to tell back the content from the keyword outline.
Right.
But that's your one step removed copy work. Then the next step removed would be to do that and then go into writing it out in sentences, writing out the sentences that you kind of heard yourself say to yourself. So that would be the next step removed. Now, some people look at that activity, especially, if you walk in and do it with a 7th grade or worse, a high school class. Some people look at that and say, that's too simplistic. That's too easy. Well, I think I said this before, but it's a pathway.
Yes.
Webster's 9 units are a pathway. Just like Suzuki method for learning music, for learning violin, it's a pathway. Anyone who comes to learn to play the violin would start at the same place. So I have found great success in saying, it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're in 2nd grade or graduate school.
Yep.
We start with keyword outlines.
Yep.
And retelling content using keyword outlines. And you know what? I've never met a person who, in the process of doing that, said, well, this is sure a waste of my time. More likely, what do we find from teachers and mothers who come to, and fathers, who come to our teaching, writing, structure, and style and do the book lice and then have to do the infrasound and elephant? Their immediate response is, whoa.
I wish I would have been taught this.
I wish I had learned this.
Yep.
This is not as easy as I thought.
Right.
There's a lot going on here.
Right.
And we could camp out there. I mean, we could just talk about Unit 2 for a long, long time.
Yep.
But that's the perfect moment where you see, okay, straight copy work and all of its advantages, one step removed. Okay, what's the next step removed?
Right.
Right? And that's where our Unit 3 and 4 come into play. And that's where we kind of start to look at the difference between what you might call creative, you might call it narrative, imaginative, inventive writing, and then what you might call academic writing. The biggest difference being, if it's imaginative or creative or inventive, you can kind of say whatever you want because you're not restricted to operating within a world of facts, right?
Absolutely.
There's fairy tales and fables and myths and things that have been told in so many different ways, and none of them really originated in solid fact. Even if they're people we believe existed, like Robin Hood, we don't know. And so that practice of elaboration. But then with Unit 4, we're back into, summarizing facts. That means you can't just make up stuff to fill up space.
Right. Right.
Although some people do think you can pull that off in the real world sometimes, but...
Well, and you coach the kids in the structure and style for students not to include fluff for fluff's sake.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Okay, so now here we are in Unit 3 and 4. It's still imitation. Okay, here's a story. You don't have to think up a story. You don't have to make it up out of your imagination.
Right.
Which for some people is really, I found that really hard as a kid. Here's an existing story that you're familiar with, either because you heard it or read it, maybe a few times. Now retell that story. So now you're imitating the structure and components more than you're imitating the language of the original, but both elements are very important. And then with Unit 4, you're saying, okay, you've got too many facts. Now we have to refine not just which keywords will move the fact for you, but which facts are worth actually moving.
Right.
What's, interesting or important or relevant. And so that's another step. So I look at Unit 3 and 4 as being pretty comfortable in terms of you're still in this tradition of imitation. You're still gaining the huge benefits of working with existing stories and existing factual information, but you're moving. Now, the next tier we get to, right, Unit 5 and Unit 6. Well, Unit 5 now is you don't even get a source text. There's no article. There's no story. But you're not completely alone. There's a set, of one or more, 2 or 3 more, whatever. There's pictures and a methodology of thinking about those pictures.
Right.
So now you're one further step removed from imitation in the strict sense, but there's still a little bit of help there. And, of course, gaining the skills to think about the pictures, to
Right.
ask the questions about the pictures.
Right. And usually when we introduce Unit 5, we do start with 3 pictures that they're connected.
Right.
And so it's almost like a mini story that the students can, see at face value. What's the central fact in this one? I can see how it's connected here. And they just basically tell that story using, the questions.
But the fact that there's no pre-existing story means the variety of
Yes.
ways
Crazy.
in which kids interpret those pictures. So now you're really moving into that world of, okay, it's on them to figure out, to invent,
Right.
which in Latin means to find, invenio, to find or discover the content to go with that. Okay, then Unit 6, we throw in this little wrench. Not only do you have one source with too many facts, no. Now you have several sources.
Right.
Or too many sources with too many facts.
Right.
So it's that filtering and sorting and moving ideas from a source text to a source outline in keywords, and then moving the best of the best from the source text outlines into the fused outline.
Right.
And that sorting, filtering, and representing, that's a lot of the kind of research stuff you have to do at higher levels, just longer papers generally.
Yes. And of course, when I was in elementary school, upper elementary school, middle school, what you just described in Unit 6, that's that note card project of how to keep all of this organized. And I just love our Unit 6 because it's so easy. The students, I'm thinking these kids are not going to have post-traumatic stress disorder because they won't have the note card problem in their lives. But I know that I used this idea of Unit 6 when I was working on my papers in my MBA program, which was super helpful. But, you at the beginning you said these units 1 and 2, so simple, keywords from every sentence. That's too easy for my blank grader. But yet how quickly we move into now something so much more complex, like the Unit 6, but yet it's incremental, step
Very
by step.
incremental. And I was so excited when we did the recording of the SSS because I really hadn't had that kind of controlled group of the same kids for 2 years who were, being held accountable to do the work.
Yep.
I mean, it's one thing to teach a class. It's another thing to have all your students do the assignments, which is necessary for the progress.
Yes.
You can talk forever, but that doesn't change anything, right?
Right.
But to see, especially that second year with the younger kids, how they really got, their little 11 by 17 paper with the source outlines, and they made the transfer from the source text we gave them, the contrived to work source texts. They made the transfer to the library book source text.
Right.
They wrote online sources.
Yeah, they wrote stories about a country of their choice. It could be any country as long as it wasn't the one that they lived in.
Yeah. And then, of course, with the Group C, we were able to really see, tremendous application of that process in a high school or really almost like a post-high school way for most of those kids. So, I think we can be very confident they're going to walk into any college environment and know right away how to deal with the problem of too much information.
Right.
Okay, but we got to push on because we're almost out of time.
Okay.
So we go to the next tier.
Right.
Which would be Unit 7 and 8. And those go together very nicely. Unit 7 is inventive writing. So this is purely just you and your brain and whatever you happen to carry around in it.
And I know you're going to say this, but I'm going to preempt you and say it. This is where other writing programs start. They don't have that pathway. They don't have that ramping up. No wonder kids are overwhelmed.
Exactly. And they jump from, okay, we did copy work in first grade because someone said we should and we believed it, to, okay, third graders, now you have to make up everything yourself.
Wow.
Right? And what happens when people fail that?
Yeah.
This is why so many schools now are looking at what we do and
true.
saying that has all the pieces of the pathway that the other program, curriculum, publisher, whatever, just didn't have.
You said once that you would challenge anybody to start with this blank page in September
Yep.
and just do it week after week, month after month, and have them take their standardized tests in March
Yep.
versus someone who starts our pathway in Unit 1 and 2 and maybe gets to Unit 7 a week before the standardized test
Yep.
and see who does better.
Yeah, and to do a fair competition, we'd have to have a cloned group of children
Oh,
who
this
are
is true.
exactly the same. But we've got almost that level
Yep.
of comparison between two very similar schools.
Right.
One which had training for their teachers. We
Yep.
assume they worked through the
Yep.
units. And then another school in the same district that did not.
Yep.
And the huge, magnitudes
Yep.
difference on objective standardized writing assessments that we didn't even know about. We
Right.
don't even know what they do.
Right.
So, yeah, we have a lot there. But yes, so that Unit 7 is where we reach that point.
Right.
And here's a connection that I think Webster was brilliant, that a lot of other people don't notice, and that is that good imaginative writing and good academic writing have some similarities. They're not completely different animals. And what are some of those similarities? Well, one would be structure. So Webster made the Unit 7 a 5-paragraph for starters model. I have since, in working with probably a broader range of children, pointed out that you can do that same process with little kids in 1 paragraph.
Yep.
Or 1 paragraph and then pretty soon 2, and then 2, pretty soon 3, and then you could add 2 more to get to 5. Or if you're just teaching younger children, you can camp out at 1 or 2 paragraphs
Yep.
for the whole year. You
Yep.
know, if it's only going to be a month out of your year or so. But that Unit 7, going to the 5-paragraph model.
I'm sorry, I have to go back to just to unpack what you just said. You said 1 to 2 paragraphs for the whole year, and then you qualified for that month.
Right, because you're in Unit 7 for approximately 1 month.
Exactly. And each of our units are about a month or so, give or take.
Yeah, 3 to 6 weeks.
And then you do it
depending.
again next year.
And then you do it again next year. And then, of course, the Unit 7 is going to be old hat. That's the great thing about children, is if they learned it and did it, then when you revisit that thing, they're like, I know this. That's like a kid goes fishing with grandpa, and now he thinks he knows everything about fishing.
Exactly.
He doesn't know everything about fishing, but the fact that he thinks he knows everything about fishing makes it easier to go fishing and learn more. If you had an experience and you come back and go, I know nothing about what I just did. Yeah, that's more me. You know, if I went fishing, I would come back and go, I still have no idea. But kids, they take to that kind of thing very quickly. So that's the great thing about revisiting. Okay, hey, it's March. We did this last March. Hey, I remember that idea.
And the prompt is different, and, you know, there's some
the
things that are
content's
different.
always different. But the structures and the checklist, they're consistent. And so then Unit 8 is also the beginning 5-paragraph essay, formal essay, and that expands to 6 or 7 for an expanded paragraph, or 8, 9, 10, or 11 for an expanded paragraph, for an expanded essay with expanded paragraphs. And then 12 to 17 paragraphs for a super. I mean, we can keep going if you want.
I was just going to say, if you're new to IEW, you're probably overwhelmed by this, but just know this about Unit 8. It can be as small as 5 paragraphs and as large as a doctoral dissertation.
And if you need more than a week to do 5 paragraphs, as could easily happen with, a student who is challenged in this area,
Right.
That's okay too.
Right.
If you need to stretch out and do 1 paragraph every other day or every third day, and it takes you 3 weeks
Yep.
to get 5 finished paragraphs, that's infinitely better than not doing it at all.
Exactly.
Even though it took longer than you might have wished. And then the next time you do it, it'll go faster. It'll go easier.
Right.
And then our Unit 9, it's kind of the bonus, I guess. We have this critique model that kind of is a hybrid between the story sequence chart of Unit 3, the introduction conclusion from Unit 6 and 7, and it would be a nice replacement for the book report. And then in our newest version of TWSS, we've got expansions off Unit 9, response to literature and literary analysis essays. So, but I guess the most important thing for people to take away from this is that it works and you don't have to figure it all out.
Right.
You do not have to redesign
Nope.
a method for kids learning to write well.
Yep.
I didn't design it. I learned it. I started teaching it. It worked well.
Yep.
I've spent 20-some years trying to refine and smooth, and with your help, create materials that are even easier to use than when you first came to my seminar
When I first came
decades ago.
and learned of the IEW method, the structure and style, all we had was the teacher training course.
Yeah.
But that is still the most important thing. And I think that fact that we focus on teacher training, and teacher could be parent, teacher could be tutor, teacher could be any environment where you are leading a kid or kids, you can now adapt the scenario for all of your kids, whether they're advanced or special needs. And, I was hearing you say about a paragraph a day or a paragraph a week with our student materials. Even structure and style for students, our video course, our new one. I know we keep talking about that, but it's new, it's exciting. It will still be exciting when it's not new, but it's a 24-week program that you can easily stretch out to be 32 weeks or whatever is appropriate for your group of kids or for your single student.
And I wish that, and maybe we should just do this, but I wish that every teacher who takes our teacher training course or who doesn't but buys something like the SSS to start there, or even someone who has a student enrolled in a class at a school or a hybrid or a co-op, and the parent is even kind of on the periphery, they're not going to invest the hours that they need to. I wish everyone would listen to that talk, The Four Deadly Errors.
Okay.
Because that, I think, frees up a parent tremendously to help in the most appropriate way. We carry a lot of baggage. We come into teaching, we come into parenting, and almost all our information comes from our experience of being taught and growing up.
I have to mention your talk, however imperfectly.
Yeah.
We tend to teach the way we were taught.
Yeah. It's hard not to do to your children what was done to you.
Yep.
And that's why our structure and style may be, for some people, very different than what they experienced in school.
Yep.
But we know. We don't hope, we don't wish, we don't believe. We absolutely know that it works. And I would guess a third of the people who work for us probably fall into that category, at least the ones who have children, of having a kid who really had a hard time with it.
Yeah.
But walk through the syllabus 2, 3, 4 more years, and now as a young adult is doing great.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this has been really helpful, Andrew, and I'm sure that we'll be having other conversations because this is such a large group that has come to IEW, has come to our family here at IEW because of the success their kids have had in writing. And we just hope that more and more we can reach those who maybe have given up on learning to write and saying, no, it's still possible for you.
And we have a lot of, I think, good and some very specific questions.
Yes.
You're going to bring to a podcast in the future. So we'll link back and forth so people can get the whole perspective.
Yep. Great. Okay. Thank you, Andrew.
All right. Thank you, Julie.
Thanks so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, you can subscribe to this podcast in iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher, or just visit us each week at iew.com/podcast. Until then, on behalf of Andrew Pudawa and the team at IEW, I thank you for allowing us to partner with you on your journey toward better listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking.